In Chapter 2, we're learning how to solve equations. The beginning of the chapter talks of 1- and 2-step equations, and in order to solve for the variable, we use inverse operations, which means that we do the opposite of whatever function is provided. So take a few minutes, pause the video, copy down, and show work for all 20 of these examples. Unpause the video and the answers will be there. Any questions, any answers that you got incorrect, make sure you mark them as incorrect and bring them up in class tomorrow so that we can go through them together. Pause the video, and when you're complete with the 20 problems, unpause. Now take a minute to check your answers. Be sure to mark incorrect whichever answers you got incorrect and ask questions on them tomorrow if you do not already see your mistake. If you see your mistake, please correct it in a different color ink to make sure that you don't make that same mistake in the future. Now we're going to talk a little bit about word problems. So we've done changing word problems that were expressions into the numerical expressions, but we haven't done word problems written as equations and changing them into their corresponding equations and then solving. So let's start with number 1. 85 students went on a field trip, 3 buses were filled, and 25 students traveled in cars. How many students were in each bus? Well, first we need to define our variable. So we can use any variable, but let's let B equal the number of students per bus, because that's what's unknown here. There's 3 buses that are filled and 25 students in cars, but we don't know how many students were on each bus. Now, 3 buses means 3 times the number of students per bus, B, plus the additional 25 students in cars equals the total amount of students, which is 85. So now we have our equation, so we can solve for how many students were in each bus, which is what the question is asking. So we're going to do inverse operations. We're adding 25, so we want to subtract 25 from both sides. That gives us 3b equals 60. Divide by 3 on both sides. We get that b equals 20 students per bus. So we get that b equals 20, but make sure you label your answer. Now take a few minutes to try 2 and 3 on your own. Make sure that you have a let statement for each. Pause the video and unpause once you've finished. So now that you've written a let statement, an equation, and solved for the variable in the next 2 problems, let's go over them. So number 2 says that Trevin had $24 to spend on 5 pens. After buying them, he had $4. How much did each pen cost? So the final question is telling us what we're looking for. How much did each pen cost? Well, we don't know the cost per pen, but we know that he had 5 pens. So let's let C, or whatever variable you decided on, equal the cost per pen. Well, we had $24 to spend on 5 pens. So 5 pens times the amount that each pen is would be our 5C. And we started with $24 minus the cost of 5 pens leaves us with $4. So we're going to now solve for C. So we subtract 24 from both sides because right now this is positive when there's no sign in front of it. We're left with negative 5C. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 5, and a negative divided by a negative leaves us with a positive $4 per pen. Number 3, you bought a magazine for $5 and some notepads for $3 each. You spend a total of $26. How many notepads did you buy? So again, we're looking for the number of notepads, and that's unknown from the rest of the question. So let's let n equal the number of notepads. Well, we know each notepad is $3, so $3 per notepad, 3n. And we spent an additional $5 on a magazine, and in total we spent $26. So now we have our equation. We're going to solve for n. So subtract 5 from both sides. 3n equals 21. Divide both sides by 3, and we get that 7 notepads were bought. Now take a minute to solve the next 3 word problems on your own. Again, let statement, equation, and then solve for the variable. Pause the video, and once you've finished, unpause. Okay, so looking at number 4. This is very similar to the first problem we did together on the other page of notes. 386 students went on a field trip. 8 buses were filled and 10 students traveled in cars. How many students were on each bus? So again, we're going to let B equal the number of students per bus. 8 buses were filled, so 8 times the number of students per bus. And an additional 10 students traveled in cars, which means there's 386 students total. Inverse operations leaves us with 8b equals 376. Divide both sides by 8, and we get that there were 47 students per bus. Please make sure you label your answer. 5. Willie rented a bus from Sarah Wong's Bikes. It cost $18 plus $5 per hour. So an initial $18, just flat rate, and then $5 per hour. If Willie paid $48 total, then he rented the bike for how many hours? So we're looking for how many hours of bike rental. So let's let H equal the number of hours of bike rental. At $5 per hour, plus he had to pay $18 no matter what for renting the bike. The total cost was $48. Again, we solve for H, subtract 18, divide by 5, and we get that 6 hours was the total amount of time that he rented the bike. Finally, in number 6, Asanji spent half of his weekly allowance at the movies. To earn more money, his parents let him wash the car for $8. What is his weekly allowance if he ended with $18? So we're going to let W equal his weekly allowance. He spent half of it, so you can either do 1/2 of W, so multiply, or you could do W divided by 2. Either one would be fine here. So he spent half of it, so he's only left with half of his allowance, and he earned an extra $8 for washing the car, which leaves him with a total of 18. So we want to figure out what he started with. So we subtract 8 from both sides, and we get 1/2 W equals 10. Dividing by a fraction, so dividing both sides by 1/2 is the same thing as multiplying both sides by 2. So this is just a little shortcut here. On the left-hand side, it cancels out. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. And on the right-hand side, we're left with 10 times 2, which is $20. If you have any questions on these, please bring them to class tomorrow. Keep in mind that some of these equations, like the one we just did, can be written different ways. So if you want to make sure that your way is correct as well, then just question it tomorrow and we will go over it then.